Guys, welcome to Counterfire. My name is Connor, and today we're going to be breaking down J.D. Vance and Tim Walz fighting over the Second Amendment and school shootings. J.D. Vance was talking about beefing up school security because school shootings are a fact of life, and Tim Walz blasted him for this, and potentially justifiably so. But as a moderate Republican myself who is trying to go along with the Democrats for the sake of this election and defeating Trump, there are plenty of things that actually make me wildly uncomfortable with Democratic positions on gun control. Kamala Harris, as an example, in 2020 said that she supported an assault weapons ban and even said something which I think is a little bit crazy, which is that she supported a mandatory buyback program similar to Australia. I couldn't disagree more with these proposed solutions, and I hope that they're not a part of the new platform, although she recently tweeted about an assault weapons ban, which again turns me off as a moderate Republican voter who might be pinching my nose and voting for Democrats. The reason why I would still, and probably still am going to be voting for Kamala Harris is because I do care about international politics. I care about America's role on the world stage. I do care about the international economy and how it affects Americans. I also care about the republic and the peaceful transfer of power. I care about the rule of law, and Trump, in my estimation, is an incompetent buffoon who told me that he doesn't care about any of those things. So if he doesn't care about any of those things, then I don't care about his candidacy for president. Now, that being said, these shouldn't be just talking points. If Tim Walz was in a room with me now, I could come up with a half dozen to a dozen policy changes that I think would significantly reduce the potential for school shootings, but we don't talk about these, and these seem like ripe and fertile ground for Democrats to capitalize on Republican non-policy solutions. As an example of how extreme and, frankly, in my opinion, obnoxious the gun community can be, Colion Noir, a popular gun rights YouTuber, stated that he was confused about whether or not the father in Georgia who gave his son, who had been investigated by the FBI for suspicion of making mass shooting threats, giving him an AR-15. Now, obviously, we need more details on the level of negligence involved, but I think it's safe to say that if your child is being investigated for making mass shooting threats, buying them an assault rifle for their birthday is probably not the best move, and if that leads to homicides, then you should be culpable criminally and definitely civilly. So seeing how extreme that kind of rhetoric is, obviously there's no solution there. So let's ignore Colion Noir, let's kind of ignore J.D. Vance, and let's talk about what Democrats actually could offer the electorate that I think would be good. So Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have an opportunity here to talk about school security initiatives. Like, we don't want to turn our schools into prisons. We don't want to make them militarized. We don't want to make them miniature jails. But we do need to have people who are capable of responding to a crisis. And that's not just a shooting crisis, but also a fire or a medical emergency. So school security personnel or school resource officers are absolutely a part of that equation. But we need to talk about the gulf between the community and law enforcement, where a healthy chunk of American communities don't feel like law enforcement is there to protect them. They feel like law enforcement is there to root out every sin that they've ever committed and then throw them in a jail cell. That's a real problem, and we have to bridge that gap, and Democrats have the ability, especially after 2020, especially after defund the police, especially after mass civil protest, to talk about how do we heal that rift and make it so law enforcement is meant to serve and protect. How do we make Americans feel like they're being served and protected, and how do we make sure that law enforcement is fulfilling the spiritual duty to which they've been assigned? It's wildly important to pretty much, I would say, one of the biggest rifts in our current culture. There are also policies that Republicans, they will support increased security. They will support school resource officers. They will support, hopefully, mending the rift between these communities. But there's also policies that might not be popular with all Republicans, but they might be popular with some Republicans, particularly social conservatives. Talking about how do we create healthier communities? How do we take care of people in crisis? How do we take care of people with drug addictions? Because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So not just talking about like, oh, well, there's all these people with all these problems, let's just throw money at them. No, specifically, what are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that young people don't get hooked on drugs? How do we make sure that young people aren't going to become a statistic of the fentanyl crisis? How do we make sure that our citizens are growing up to be healthy, happy, and productive? And one of the things that I think is a left-wing talking point, but serves a right-wing end, is economic justice. Now, I know that's wildly unpopular on the right, but the truth is that having people work for less than subsistence wages isn't good for anyone. If there's a mother and a father and they both have to work full time, and then the father has to work 1.5 or 2 jobs in order to make ends meet, that means that the mother isn't in the home. She's barely able to take care of and have a relationship with the kids during her off hours at work. And then the father is not present at all because he's so busy busting his hump in order to make ends meet. He doesn't have an opportunity to raise his kids. He doesn't have an opportunity to mentor them. He doesn't have an opportunity to talk to them during crises. So if the right wing and Republicans, of whom I consider myself a Republican, if you actually care about fathers being present in the household and the crisis of single motherhood is so important, then fathers and mothers need the ability to work decent jobs with decent wages, with decent benefits that allow them to take care of their families. And oftentimes when we're talking about mass shooters or people involved in gang crime or people who are using firearms in criminal ways, there are people who are coming from families that don't have this kind of support system, and they're coming from communities that have been devastated by decades of bad policy. So talk about that. We don't have to just use these as political cudgels in order to beat each other with. We could actually use these as foundations on which to build sound policy that actually resonates with a healthy chunk of Americans. I think that the assault weapons ban is popular with 53% of Americans. Banning assault weapons, then people are going to move to semi-automatic pistols. When they move to semi-automatic pistols, you're going to want to ban semi-automatic pistols. When you get rid of the semi-automatic pistols, you're going to move to revolvers and lever actions and pump guns. The problem is not the tool, at least in my estimation. The problem is all the other policy initiatives that Democrats could talk about for which the Republicans just don't have an answer. I'm literally taking a cudgel. I'm taking a baseball bat of policy and I'm trying to hand it to Democrats to beat Republicans with in a political stance, but then to affect actual change. As somebody who's been dealing with these problems, for 30 years now, it would be sincerely appreciated if we made some forward progress on these issues. But getting back to it, talking about not just guns, not just emergency red flag laws, not just assault weapons bans, which again, I don't support assault weapons bans, but talking about just communities, just wages, helping people in crisis, improving school security while making sure that we're not treating our future Americans like jail inmates, solving the rift between law enforcement and the communities with which they serve. These are all opportunities for leadership. And I think that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, if they cared, if they sincerely care, they are being handed a golden opportunity. So my plea to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is seize this opportunity, beat your political opponents with the rhetoric, but then actually bring Republicans and Democrats together to effect real effective policy that will reduce school shootings and improve our communities. Thank you for watching. Have a great one. Bye for now.